Danielle Devereaux, who met Andrea Giesbrecht in 1996 and worked with her until 2000 at Pioneer Grain, told court that Giesbrecht was worried when she was pregnant in 1997. She said she didn't want to have the baby and talked about plans on how to abort the baby, Devereaux testified. Devereaux said Giesbrecht talked about it every day, saying she just wanted to punch herself in the stomach or use a coat hanger to abort it. When asked under cross-examination why she didn't tell anyone about Giesbrecht's expressed desire to abort her pregnancy, Devereaux said, "I was 18 or 19 and didn't know how to handle it. I'd never had a friend who was pregnant and having these thoughts." Giesbrecht was 42 at the time of this testimony, and she was facing 6 counts of concealing bodies. The judge-only trial took place in provincial court in Winnipeg, and the court had heard that infant remains were discovered on October 20th, 2014, inside a storage unit rented by Giesbrecht under her maiden name, Naworinsky. The remains were in various states of decomposition, wrapped in kitchen-style garbage bags, placed in duffel bags, and stored in large household containers and pails. Experts determined the remains belonged to 5 boys and 1 girl. Court heard earlier in the trial Giesbrecht has 2 sons. Her firstborn son was born in 1997, and she was pregnant with her second in 2002. Court heard earlier in the trial. The judge also heard that Giesbrecht had 9 abortions and 1 miscarriage between 1994 and 2011. The number of pregnancy terminations was confirmed by Giesbrecht's lawyer. So Devereaux, who met Giesbrecht after moving to Winnipeg from Newfoundland and Labrador, described Giesbrecht as a good friend, who often spoke of getting her finances together. So Giesbrecht had a gambling problem. She called in sick to work regularly and pawned her engagement ring before her wedding, Devereaux said. So Giesbrecht had also pleaded guilty to unrelated fraud charges. Devereaux testified that Giesbrecht did not tell her husband, Jeremy Giesbrecht, or her parents or anyone else at work that she was pregnant until after she drove herself to the hospital and gave birth to her first child. The boy was born at 34 weeks. A healthy baby, it seems, weighed 5 pounds, according to details from Giesbrecht's medical records that were presented earlier in the trial. Everybody was shocked because one day she was at work and the next day she had the baby, Devereaux told court. She said if she hadn't told her parents and Jeremy that she had the baby, she would have given the baby up for adoption. Devereaux testified that she had asked Giesbrecht how Jeremy did not know she was pregnant if she was having sex and had a baby bump, but Giesbrecht told her that he did not notice. Giesbrecht was a tall, thin girl, but she covered up her pregnancy with sweaters and loose pants and often wore her coat at work, said Devereaux, who added that a small baby bump was only visible if Giesbrecht pulled up her clothing tight to her body. We talked about it, like why didn't she open up to tell her parents and Jeremy? She never gave a reason why, Devereaux said. It was clear that she didn't want me to tell anybody. So the women in Winnipeg, those who don't know, there's some interesting types. Andrea Giesbrecht is not an uncommon name in Winnipeg. Just right up there with Matthew Neufeld, and you're gonna see a bunch of these names and people saying, "Oh, don't I know her?" Not that Andrea Giesbrecht. This lady, had her firstborn son in 1997, didn't tell anybody. I mean, the kid, I guess, is reading this and is like, okay. The husband didn't seem too attentive. And she was having tons of abortions. Some likely intentional miscarriages. No mention of any birth control of any kind, but all the same, she definitely lamented each of these pregnancies, and two of which did come to term, as she did actually have two children. So Winnipeg Police Detective Edward Chalmers, who arrested Andrea Giesbrecht hours after the remains were discovered, said that he and three other officers from Winnipeg Police Services Child Abuse Unit went to the Giesbrecht home at 10:37 p.m. on October 20th, 2014. Jeremy Giesbrecht answered the door and told police that Andrea was downstairs sleeping. She was brought upstairs to the door and arrested. Andrea Giesbrecht was initially arrested for homicide, but eventually charged with concealing bodies, and those are the charges she faced at trial. Chalmers told court that he and Jeremy... Chalmers, the detective, told court that he asked Jeremy if he knew his wife had rented a storage locker and when she was pregnant. The officer was not allowed to testify to the answers he received, as doing so would be hearsay. Chalmers also testified that Jeremy had phoned him twice wanting to talk, but he wasn't home when the officer went to see him. Officers later found Jeremy with his sister, who refused to give her name and instructed Jeremy not to speak with police, court was told. The lawyer representing Andrea Giesbrecht said his client was saving the bodies of 6 babies from being disposed of at a garbage dump, not trying to conceal them. To make sure they were kept in a storage locker, to make sure they didn't end up in a garbage dump, it's saving, not disposing of them, said her defense lawyer, Greg Brodsky. In closing arguments, conceal means to hide. It does not mean to keep. Dispose means to get rid of, not to save, said Brodsky. Brodsky's defended a lot of murderers. Like, he comes up on these episodes regularly. Hit or miss attorney. Depends on the case. You gotta give him something to work with. So, on this one, he says, Concealing what? No. We're disposing what? No. My client was respecting the memory of her children, and she certainly was not gonna just throw them in a garbage dump. No, she rented a storage container like any rational mother would do and stored the corpses of her children in there, where they could be interned with respect. She's a great mom. So Brodsky is trying to eat this thing. He doesn't always have an appetite. But today he was hungry. I guess it depends. I'm not going to say on who and on what. But I guess the Andrea Giesbrechts, he feels like he can get those off. So he says, there's no evidence the babies breathed. There's no evidence they cried, he added. So the Crown argued the dead infants found in the Winnipeg storage locker were carelessly packaged, cast aside, hidden away, and unloved by the woman who did everything to conceal her pregnancies. She was having abortions and taking her friends along, Brodsky said. She wore ordinary clothes, and whether it was boring, it's not relevant. It wasn't the purpose of concealing a pregnancy. That's just her style. It's just, she liked her shit baggy. So the judge was told that, the Crown proved its case and there should be convictions entered on all 6 counts of concealing bodies. The Crown doesn't need to prove the babies were born alive, only that they were born at a state of development that would suggest they were likely alive. Adding that the Crown must also prove that the remains were being concealed. So, the Crown's fighting it. 6 births. Concealed completely. Doesn't tell anybody. Nobody knows about it. 6. But the lawyer's saying, look, she didn't do anything wrong. This is fine. What is the issue? What is everybody making such a big deal about here? So, he's like, she's taking friends to the abortions. Greg Brodsky says, she wasn't concealing anything. It was chill. I think she just maxed out on the amount of abortion she could get, and so so he's basically going on to say, if the Crown could prove the babies were definitely born alive, we'd be here on a whole different set of charges. So she was having abortions and taking her friends along, Brodsky said. Again, he reiterates, she wasn't concealing anything. And Miss Giesbrecht, she was trying to conceal these remains. She was hiding them. She was not saving them, as my friend, the defense lawyer Brodsky, suggested. So they're going back and forth. So her learned friend is what lawyers call each other, and so there's security footage of her paying for the storage locker. She's calling around about the storage locker. She's getting mail to the house about it. My husband's like, maybe she's running the mailbox, I guess. Like, another one from U-Haul? Yeah, I don't know. I keep calling them. I keep telling them, like, I don't have one. Okay. Like, she didn't even get the online bills. I mean, this is mid, 2010s, but, so the Crown said the babies may have born between the birth of Giesbrecht's first son in 2002, which is actually the daughter was born in 2002, and the therapeutic abortions she had in 2009 and 2011. When you look at all the evidence before the court, especially the medical evidence, it's clear Mrs. Giesbrecht is aware of how to get pregnant and how to give birth. Remains from all 6 infants were linked to Giesbrecht and her husband after a DNA sample was taken from a sanitary napkin found in the couple's bedroom and compared to DNA found in the storage locker. A forensic biologist testified the biological father of the infants was Jeremy Giesbrecht. So, I mean, that eliminates one motive. Hey, maybe she was having an affair. She didn't want to get caught. No. Like, these were her husband's kids. So on August 31st, a forensic pathologist who helped review autopsies of the remains testified that there wasn't enough evidence to confirm or deny whether the infants were born alive. So apparently Giesbrecht was trying to mask the smell of decomposing remains, but when she went into default with payments to the locker, she was no longer able to access the locker and take care of the smell. So if you've ever watched Storage Wars, like, somebody doesn't pay their locker, then they get locked out. I don't know if this episode would have made it to air. Hey, here we go! 50, 40, we got 150 here, 250 here. Dave Hester buys the thing. He's like, oh, that fetus, that's an easy $50 bill. That one, 40. That one's about 4 pounds. Look at this one. Oh, a fetus, all right, that's another 20. Load it up. Let's see what they're worth. Like, I don't know. I don't know why you would store corpses in a storage locker, but if you're gonna do it, you kind of got to keep up with the bill. Now, I get it. She likes to play the Vilt. She's gambling when she's not having unprotected sex with her husband. She's gambling or having abortions or giving birth to babies that may or may not have been alive. And, she got tied up. She couldn't keep up with the tab. So, she's locked out. And the smell became overwhelming. So, I mean, she was keeping the remains in garbage bags that were stored inside other bags or containers. So it's not like she had, I don't know, cat litter, lye, anything to really mask the stench of death emanating from the corpses in this locker, but they couldn't compose the cause of death because the remains were so decomposed. So there was a trial. It took about 5 months. There's some delays, and the prosecutor fell ill. Other delays about conversations between Giesbrecht and her husband, if those would be allowed because of marital protections. In the end, Jeremy Giesbrecht was not asked about those conversations during his last day of cross-examination. He did, however, testify that his wife wore boring clothes, added that he's unaware his wife had been pregnant several times over the years, apart from the 2 children they have together. The Crown, however, told Thompson that Jeremy Giesbrecht's evidence is suspect and should be taken with a grain of salt. It's hard to believe he did not know she was pregnant with these 6 babies. So the trial heard that Giesbrecht had 10 abortions between 94 and 2011, a number confirmed by her lawyer. And in the opening days of trial, Danielle Iesi testified she saw a small hand and felt what possibly could have been a head wrapped in a kitchen-style garbage bag stored in large household containers in a storage locker. Essie was in charge of collecting exhibits from the scene in October 2014. So Patrol Sergeant Corey Ford testified as the first officer on the scene. He recalled a strong smell of decay coming from the locker. Rivera, Winnipeg forensic pathologist, testified that 2 sets of remains belonged to boys at 40 and 38 weeks gestation. So, 9 months is about 36 weeks. So 40 and 38 weeks, these are full-term, meaning full-term babies in both cases. He said he could not determine the cause of their death. The latter boys' remains were in pails packed with white powder that was found inside the storage locker, heard court. So some of them, it seems like she was trying to ask some of it. Another infant was determined to be between 35 and 39 weeks gestation, another full term. But Rivera said the remains provided him with very little other information. As a result, he couldn't do any further examination. There was nothing left. He said Rivera said he could not tell if any of the infants were born alive or dead. He told CBC this case is one of the oddest he's ever dealt with, both regards to the sheer number of autopsies I had to perform at the same time, as well as the actual circumstances surrounding the case, Rivera said. In court, Rivera provided the following details about the other remains. So, let's talk about Andrea Giesbrecht's kids. So only skeletal remains were left of one infant, Rivera said, so he could not determine gender or cause of death. One infant was between 34 and 38 weeks full term. One set belonged to a girl, couldn't say how she died. So she pled not guilty to 6 counts of concealing bodies. Each charge carried a maximum sentence of 2 years. Giesbrecht is being tried in front of a judge alone in provincial court. So she didn't go jury, which is a smart play on this one because they would have put her under the jail. So she's being tried under just the letter of the law. No emotion involved. The court previously heard testimony from one of Giesbrecht's sons and her husband. I thought she only had the one, well, her alive son and her husband, Jeremy Giesbrecht, who both said they didn't notice she had been pregnant multiple times. Jeremy Giesbrecht is expected to continue undergoing cross-examination, but it's not clear if his testimony would divulge anything. Under the Canada Evidence Act, spouses have the right not to disclose in their testimony any communications they've had with each other. So Jeremy Giesbrecht had told the crowd he would not waive his spousal communication privilege, but he later told court he would be prepared to waive it for some questions from the defense. So he's backing his wife. Giesbrecht then balked when he was advised that waiving his privilege would give the Crown an opportunity to ask him more questions afterwards. So the judge was overseeing the trial, gave Giesbrecht time to seek advice from independent counsel regarding spousal privileges before continuing his testimony. But as the trial resumed the following Monday, court heard Jeremy Giesbrecht had trouble finding the lawyer. It remains to be seen if he's going to waive the privilege there at the time. The lengthy trial heard from the husband, the son, friends, U-Haul employees, police, and forensic experts. Due to the lesser charge, Giesbrecht couldn't be compelled to provide a blood sample, but police located her DNA on a sanitary napkin found in her closet. She holds on to things. Why you're holding on to a used maxi pad in your closet? I don't know. I don't know anything that this woman is doing. I don't know. But this is the women of Winnipeg. They don't always make sense. They don't always apply logic to their decisions. All 6 infants were between 34 and 42 weeks of gestation, said the medical examiner. So 6 stillborn babies. The likelihood of that would be 1 in 500 trillion. So suffice it to say, if we're applying any logic here, some of these kids were alive. You know, she murdered these babies and concealed them, logically speaking. But, you know, we don't always apply logic when it comes to the likes of Andrea Giesbrechts in Winnipeg, especially in the justice system. There's not a lot of Andrea Giesbrechts ending up in the jail. So, despite how many murders they've committed, I mean, and it needs to be proven. This is the way the justice system operates. So, the husband, during his testimony, said he knew about 9 abortions, but was unaware there were other pregnancies. He told court he had a vasectomy in 2011, but did not go for a follow-up appointment to see if it was successful. I don't know what is going on in this household. This is like the most bizarre people ever. So in his guilty ruling, the justice said that all the children were likely born alive. There's no evidence of complications in these pregnancies. So as a mother, apparently 2 sons, I thought one was a daughter, but Giesbrecht understood birth and pregnancy. He said all of her actions led to one conclusion, that Giesbrecht was aware these children were likely to have been born alive, and she wished to conceal the fact of their birth. Andrea Giesbrecht had been sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for concealing the remains of 6 infants in a storage locker in Winnipeg. With time served already factored in, Giesbrecht was to spend another 7 years and 10 months in prison. 7 years and 10 months, you know, maybe just over a year a body. Giesbrecht's moral culpability is extremely high, the judge said. Giesbrecht showed little emotion in the court. As the judge read his decision, the 43-year-old was convicted in February 2017 of hiding the bodies of 6 infants in a U-Haul storage locker she rented. The remains were found October 2014 by employees at the facility after the woman failed to pay her bill. So the reality is the woman is out of prison. She served her time. Like, that's the reality of it. So yeah, she bagged up each of the bodies, encased some of them in cement or powder, all in an effort to contain the smell of human decomposition and decay. So the judge pointed to the criminal code, explaining it's against the law, disposing of an infant remains when the death can't be investigated, and concealing the bodies. But she thwarted the police's ability to determine if the deaths occurred before or after birth. So Thompson said each of the 6 infants represented 6 separate offenses. Giesbrecht's moral culpability increased after the first offense. He sentenced her to 6 months for the first infant, 1 year for the second, 2 for each of the 4 other infants found, for a total of 9.5 years, a sentence length that would be crushing to Giesbrecht. So he therefore reduced the sentence by 1 year minus time served. When delivering Giesbrecht's sentence, Thompson said denunciation and personal deterrence took paramount importance. These were newly delivered infants are most vulnerable, he said. Thompson acknowledged the existence of mitigating factors, including pre-sentence report, that assessed Giesbrecht as a low risk to reoffend with a good record of employment and relationships with her 2 surviving children. These were outweighed by aggravating factors, including that these were repeated offenses committed over a long period of time, and that Giesbrecht didn't seek help at any time during or after her pregnancies. He also said Giesbrecht has shown a lack of remorse for the offenses. The judge dismissed the possibility of non-custodial sentence, noting Giesbrecht has a well-documented history of deceiving others. Thompson singled out Giesbrecht's history of gambling addiction, 2 convictions of fraud over $5,000, and the deceit confirmed by the convictions of concealing the remains. So I don't know, man. Like, what? And the judge is just like, oh, it'd be too tough if she did 9.5 years on 6 bodies. But by the letter of the law, she's not there for any murders. So, we're not counting the legal abortion bodies that the husband's like, oh yeah, I knew she had 9. This is insanity. This is Winnipeg. This is Winnipegology.